I need sleep. But whenever I close my eyes, I see it. I must share this burden with someone. My life is now a waking nightmare because of that terrible video. I found it online, on the dark web. You know what I'm talking about. The place where drug dealers and pedophiles rub elbows with arm merchants and killers for hire. The place where terrorists conspire and all sorts of ugly rumors roam. I thought it would be a good idea to visit this place. My purpose? Call it morbid curiosity. I was looking for the most extreme content I could find. Snuff movies, red rooms, all the bad things commingled in one place. I consider myself a student of the human condition and am fascinated by the man's darker urges, his apparent hatred of himself. I wanted to plumb the depths of his sickness and see what I could find. Knowledge for its own sake, or something. I come from a wealthy family and have never known want. I knew I would have to pay for my curiosity, so I purchased several $1,000s worth of crypto in advance. I will not go into details of accessing the dark web. If you have the desire, it only takes a little bit of research. Seek, and you shall find. In my search, I scoured various message boards covering many distasteful topics, such as cannibalism. I chatted with several strange individuals, most of whom were disrespectful of my direct approach in seeking what I saw. A few offered to make a trade, but wanted me to show them something first. I, however, had nothing to offer, except money. I was burned more than a few times, but I'd anticipated as much. After more than 2 weeks of searching and being continuously ripped off, I finally came across something interesting. The promise of a genuine red room. That is to say, a live-streamed murder. After a days-long conversation with a friendly stranger on a rather disturbing message board, I was provided with a link to this livestream. He assured me it was genuine and unlike anything I'd ever seen. It cost me a mere $500, and I have no doubt what I saw was real. If you saw it, you would know too. The scene began abruptly with the camera displaying a large, windowless room with high ceilings. Mulch covered the floor. What appeared to be a giant rock took up one corner, and opposite, this was a kid's swimming pool filled with water. Jesus Christ, how could I have known what was about to happen? A portion of the ceiling suddenly opened and a woman, upside down, was lowered into the room. She was suspended by the feet from what looked like giant forceps. She writhed. Her hands were bound behind her back and tape covered her mouth. Needless to say, she was visibly terrified. Nothing happened for a few seconds. Then, from under the rock, a head appeared. It was a snake. An anaconda, I believe. Slowly, so slowly, it emerged from its hide, forked tongue tasting the air. The girl's eyes bulged from her head with the most intense shock I had ever seen. The snake continued its creeping advance. It was massive. It had to be at least 50 feet long. One gigantic flowing muscle. I had never seen a snake so big. It was an absolute monster if there ever was one. The snake's face rose to within inches of hers, tongue darting in and out. It loomed above her, all coiled aggression. Mercifully, the woman fainted. Whatever was holding the forceps began to shake the woman, like someone dangling a toy in front of a cat. The snake's head pulled back slightly, tongue still flickering. It remained still for a moment, and then it struck. Its jaws clamped down on her throat, and its body whipped around her with lightning speed. It took her to the floor and proceeded to squeeze the life from her as the giant forceps were lifted from the room and the ceiling panel replaced by unseen hands. I watched stunned as the snake uncoiled and released its teeth from her throat. It then unhinged its jaw and began to swallow her whole, a hideous lump working its way down the length of the snake's body. The entire process could not have taken more than 20 minutes. Afterwards, I sat in silence for what seemed like hours, trying to process what I had just watched. My conscience gnawed at me to do something. That poor woman was in the springtime of her life, and others could be in danger of the same ghastly fate. This had to be reported. I looked down at the wet circle on my crotch and sighed. I paid for this, and I was just as guilty as the psychopaths who made this film. I could never go to prison. I looked up at the screen. Thank you for purchasing Death by Beast. Next week, watch a frenzy of tiger sharks rip apart a Brazilian volleyball team. Only $999. Click here to order now. That was 1 week ago. The shark video is starting in a few minutes. I imagine it will be quite horrific, and I have a heavy feeling in the pit of my stomach. But I'm also trembling with anticipation. Can you imagine the carnage? I know I shouldn't watch, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And now, I have someone to share my burden with. I hope you will lend me your ear again, since I doubt sleep's comfort will visit me tonight. But with your help, maybe I'll sleep tomorrow night, or the next night, or the next. Boredom is hitting everyone hard right now, with social distancing a top priority. We are all finding interesting ways to keep ourselves occupied. I think I may have ventured a little too much though. It all started 3 weeks ago, sitting in my bedroom. I tossed a softball into the air for a few minutes before I sat up on the edge of my bed. I looked over at my laptop I had been neglecting since I dropped out of college. I turned it on and began surfing. Nothing much had changed on the net. I visited all the regular sites I used to: Pinterest, YouTube, and Tumblr. I thought about what I could do with that piece of technology. This triggered a craving I had for a long time. The want to visit the dark web. I had heard only terrible things. It's a place to find organs, drugs, and weapons. I had no use for any of those things, but still, curiosity got the best of me. Before I knew it, I was downloading the browser that would bridge my access. Aside from all those scary things I could find on the dark web, I had seen some videos a while back about mystery boxes. You can pay anywhere from $5 to hundreds of dollars for a plain brown box filled with goodies. The contents were undisclosed, hence the mystery part. This could be something fun, as it was definitely enticing. A 5-minute search landed me on a site that had exactly what I was looking for. Now, I did not have much cash to just blow, so I kept a modest budget of $20. I searched through countless sellers, although I could not exactly tell you why. There was no way of determining which would be the best option, since the descriptions were quite vague. Still, I was a little nervous. I was flushing a crisp Jackson down the toilet. Knowing my luck, I'd receive a box with a chewed up piece of bubblegum inside. My laptop was one of those you could fold in half and turn it into a tablet. So I decided for fate to choose my purchase. I entered my budget in the filters and converted my laptop to tablet form. I closed my eyes and swiped my finger upwards, then pressed down to make my selection. The selection was not all that great, but I was tired of searching already. I read through what was available. Mystery box, life-changing, valued at priceless, my loss, your gain, winky face. Sounded good enough to me. My lips pursed as I typed in my credit card information, name and address, as if my body was not agreeing with what I was commanding. The box arrived just 3 days later. I could hardly contain my excitement as I carried it into my bedroom. I sat it on my bed and studied it a bit. No return address. Typical. My fingernails began picking at the tape and tearing away. Pulling the flaps apart revealed sparkly tissue paper. Cute. The content inside? Not so cute. There was a muddy pair of shoes. No big deal, I guess. But it was a little weirder that the pair of shoes seemed brand new. The soles were not worn out. The tongue did not have any creases and wrinkles that you would expect, and the insides were almost spotless. The next item was tiny, black, crushed velvet bag. The kind of bags you pull closed with strings. The feeling was not very impressive. I shook the bag around a bit and thought it sounded like little rocks inside. I pulled the mouth apart and poured out the contents into my hand. An audible "fuck" escaped my lips. My hand flipped over to break the contact it had with my skin. They scattered. Teeth? Really? I let my body rid the creeps by giving a little shiver. I peered back in the box. One more item remained. A diamond ring. Maybe this box wasn't such a dud after all. I'm no jeweler, but I did know that a quick look at the band of authentic gold would most likely result in finding the carats in small print. 18K. Not bad. I sized up the ring, which was visibly small. I wondered if I could have it altered. I might as well get something usable out of this. The next day, I carried my small finding to a local jewelry shop. I inquired about the authenticity, which they verified. A small fee, and a day later, I was sporting new ice. I was pleased with my purchase enough to leave a modest review to my seller. But when I tried to rate him or her, my laptop froze up. I tried everything I could to reboot with no success. Holding down the power button, closing and reopening, pressing a combination of keys. Finally, I gave up and let it do its own thing. An hour later, it finally powered off and restarted. I blew this off as a mandated update. The screen displayed the typical downloading files, followed by a slow restarting bar filling horizontally. After all that mess, I did not bother to revisit the website. I had probably caught a bug on the damn thing, and was lucky it still worked at all. My day was interrupted by a knock on the door. At the other side of my door stood a man who towered over me. I only poked my head out and placed my hand on the outside of the door, almost hugging it, obviously uncomfortable with an unexpected visitor. The man at the door verified my name, then asked if I would follow him down to the station, just to ask me a few questions. Station? What station? I asked. The police station, he responded. In the middle of us talking, I noticed he was staring at my hand, which I jerked away, still unconvinced with what this was all regarding. Regardless, I was too scared to question him, and did as he asked. We arrived at the police station where I was guided into a small room. Only a desk and 3 chairs were inside. A video camera in the corner. The officer proceeded to ask me questions. Where I was on some night 3 years prior. Where I was on some night 8 months prior. If I knew a young woman by the name Selena Ramos. If I was familiar with a lady named Melody Stacy. It was all a bit much to take in, but I gladly obliged, as I had no idea where they were going. I knew I had done nothing wrong. I knew I had nothing to hide. I knew that the faster I answered their questions, the faster it would be all over with. I remained in that room for hours. He asked the same questions, in different formats, in an attempt to catch me in a lie. He asked for my permission to search my home, grab what they needed, get my fingerprints, all that good stuff. Again, as I had nothing to hide, I agreed. Trying to explain where the things came from was no use. They only circled back to my search history. They claimed to know this was my scapegoat, and even advised me I wasn't going to get out of this one. The officer stated, "We are not buying your bullshit. There was no black web visited from your computer. There is no purchase made from Wolves 384. Just face it, we got you." That was enough to make my tears stop. I cocked my head sideways and said, "Excuse me? What did you say?" I continued, "Wolves 384? How did you know the name of the seller?" I couldn't even remember the name of the seller. For a millisecond, I saw him swallow a heavy gulp, then he fixed his tie. "Cut it out. You told me. That's what you said when you were at your house," he said. No, you're lying. I didn't say shit. You didn't even tell me why you were there. Why the fuck would I bring that up?" Like clockwork, a second detective enters the room and interrupts me. He doesn't say anything, besides officially putting me under arrest for kidnapping, murder, false imprisonment. I believe there was more, but I did not catch everything. My surroundings became fuzzy. I felt like I was going to be sick, and my hearing was fading in and out. I just spoke with my lawyer. He says they have a solid case against me. They found Selena's teeth at my apartment. They caught me with Melody's wedding ring, and the shoes they had photographs of me throwing away matched the shoe prints left at Melody's crime scene. My laptop had gruesome photos of their bloated and rotted bodies. My search history was criminal, such as how to frame someone for murder, how to create faux searches, how to hack someone's computer, not to mention the anonymous tip they have on file claiming I had gotten drunk one night and confessed to the murders. I don't even fucking drink. Worst of all, being such an introvert and loner, I have no way to prove my locations for the dates provided. There's no use. I stand warned that I need to sign a plea or risk death penalty. The cases have been going for years now. The government is ready to solve it, and nothing closes a case better than a guilty plea. My son, Thomas, never had a shortage of friends. Always the class clown. Always the likable, relatable, funny goof that he was. He passed away 2 months ago. He jumped off an overpass and landed on his neck. He was 17, and I'm writing this for him because he wanted me to. I know a lot of you know about the internet and the dark web and all of that. The thing is, I didn't. And maybe if I had, my son would still be alive. Please, stay off the dark web. The game is called Veritatem Declare, and I'm an American English speaker, but I believe it means something along the lines of tell the truth in Latin. I only began to notice things after his last few months. Troubles at school, which he never had. He sat behind a girl in class and cut a chunk of hair off her head. He was suspended. I would look through the history of his computer to find violent videos, people being murdered and sodomized. Video after video, white powder substance all over his room, salt lining his windows. We took him to the dentist because of an infection on the side of his mouth. The dentist examined him and pulled me aside to let me know my son had pulled out and crushed 3 teeth in his mouth himself. The last straw was when I caught him in the bathroom about 2 months before he died. He was carving some sort of symbol into his arm on a live stream. I figured his odd behavior must be a cry for help, thinking maybe he was depressed or suicidal. He was hospitalized for a week and then released. 2 weeks later, my son died. A month before my son died, every person in my family received an email. Each one read, "Ask Thomas about the little girl who died down the street. Ask him what he knows. Make him tell the truth." The email came from an anonymous sender, and when confronted with it, Thomas began to get nervous and visibly sick. Who sent it to Thomas? I want to know. If this is some sick prank to scare your little sister, it's not funny. I leaned against the counter and crossed my arms. The email pulled up on the laptop in front of my son. He kept his head low, avoiding eye contact with me, staring at his fingers in his lap. "I don't know what it is, Mom. Probably some spam email or something," he muttered, almost looking up at me, but quickly averting his gaze. "A spam email that happens to have your name in it and information on the crime committed down the street a few weeks ago? I don't think so." I glanced at the screen for a moment. "So, do you know something you're not telling your father and I about this?" I said, looking back at him again. "No." Tears welled up in his eyes as he stared at his computer screen. "I don't know anything." "What is going on with you, Thomas? This is so unlike you. Please, if you're not okay, please just tell us. We want to help you. We want our Tom back." I put my hand on his, but he pulled it away quickly and wiped his eyes quicker. "I don't know anything, Mom. I already told you. I'm fine." He got up abruptly and started towards the doorway. Now I could feel the tears begin to form in my eyes as I saw him walk away. My son was almost unrecognizable. He was skin and bones, purple bags under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. His clothes hung and bagged on him as I saw him walk to the door. "I love you," I squeaked out. He stopped for a moment and looked back at me, and I swear to God, I never seen more pain in someone's eyes than I saw in his in that moment. He let a tear fall as he turned away again, his back to me now. "I love you, Mama," he croaked out before exiting the room quickly. He began to look worse as time went on. Thin, frail, tired, fatigued. My husband and I found therapists, took him to doctors, pulled him out of school, and did everything we thought was right leading up to my son's suicide. About a week after his death, I felt like half of me was missing. I couldn't move or talk or get out of bed, and I didn't. All I could do was think about Thomas, and the guilt ate me alive. I knew my email had to be overflowing with emails from clients at work, and I knew I had to get back to work soon. For me, for my husband, for my daughter. 2 weeks later, I finally checked in. At the very top of my inbox was an email with an anonymous sender and no subject. I began to tear up, wishing whoever it was would just leave me alone and let me grieve. But curiosity got the better of me and I opened it. I wish I hadn't. The email was nothing but 9 black words that read, "He did it, and the game is not over." Something happened to me a few weeks ago that I planned to keep a secret, but recently it had been eating away at me and I needed to speak about it. The situation involves the dark web, but it isn't like all the other stories you hear of. Some unsuspecting soul learning of the dark web through a friend, going on it for the first time and browsing around until they inevitably come across some horrifying page that leave them sleepless for nights. No, this is the opposite. To be honest, I'm actually the one who would be terrifying these curious souls. You see, I'm a dark web prankster, meaning I spend my free time on the dark web messaging with unsuspecting strangers. I join chat rooms and send them links to gory but obviously fake videos. I play similar videos in place of my webcam in private chats, tricking the other user into thinking they are chatting with a psychopathic killer. My favorite trick, though, is taking control of their cursor, manipulating the chat room and making the site unclosable unless they turn off their machine. This one gets the most screams and appalled expressions, and it is all achieved through running some simple bash scripts. Now, some people may think this is cruel, but I see it as a service. A free one at that. You see, these people come onto the dark web for these kind of experiences. They hear somebody tell a scary story of their experience on the big bad dark web, and they want to be able to tell similar stories in a sad attempt to be interesting. They come looking to be terrified, and I ensure they aren't disappointed. Of course, I get my own enjoyment out of it, so it's a win-win. But recently, this has all changed. If you fly too close to the sun, you will eventually be burned. I am burning. The night started like any other. I got back from work, made some dinner, and after washing up, I logged onto my PC and got to work. I jumped around a few chat rooms, but they were unusually quiet or taking way too long to connect. And when they did connect, people left before I got a chance to mess with them. Eventually, I was able to keep someone around for more than a few seconds. They were some bald dude with a gnarly scar across their nose. His ears and face were both heavily pierced, and he had a python tattoo wrapped around his neck. A tough guy. They were always fun to make cry like a baby. The way I usually do these pranks is I keep the screen blank until I see the person. Then I choose from the collection of cam clips I have and slowly escalate it from there. For this specific instance, I chose a clip of a cute girl who starts by smiling and waving. The man smiled back and began typing until a message popped up. "Hi, you are cute. Thank you. I like your tattoo." We went back and forth typing and discussing ourselves until I decided to start the fun. I took down the video of the girl and replaced it with a video that starts with a man tied to a chair. A masked man then begins to beat the man in the chair with a hammer. To my surprise, the man didn't seem horrified. Instead, he began to wholeheartedly laugh before sending another message. Funny, but I preferred the lady. I replied telling him to shut up or the girl will get it next. Once that message sent, the man's laughter stopped, and he began to stare into the camera with a cold, emotionless gaze. "You shouldn't be so rude." That message was the beginning of the end for my pranking. He began to type again, and when he stopped, my jaw dropped and my fun was over. He sent the message and it was my full name. I quickly moved my cursor up and tried to exit out of the chat, but my cursor froze before dissipating before my very eyes. I opened my console and began to frantically type some commands, but each one was denied. Slowly, the chat began to turn black with red fun. I was in a full-blown panic now. My heart was racing and I felt like I had spikes sticking into my arms, legs, and neck. I couldn't control my breathing, and I was sweating profusely. All the while, that psycho was smiling into the camera, his dirty yellow teeth glaring at me as he continued to type. "Let's have a look, shall we?" The light from my webcam lit up, and sure enough, down in the left-hand corner of the screen was my terrified face, staring aimlessly at the screen. My brain was screaming instructions at me, but my body couldn't react. I was frozen in fear. Eventually, I snapped out of it and stood up to turn off my computer when he screamed in a deep, grisly, distorted voice. Wait. This stopped me in my tracks. I looked back at the screen and he was gone, but only momentarily. When he returned, he was standing up, leaning over directly into the camera. He lifted his hand balled in a fist and opened it, revealing multiple human teeth, which fell from his hand and bounced off the desk beneath. He then sent the last message. "See you soon, boy." He smiled as the words in the chat room began to fall off the screen, as a loud screeching noise blared from my speakers. Just then, my computer switched itself off, leaving me standing staring at my reflection on the darkened monitor. I must have stood there for at least 5 minutes before I snapped out of it and went to bed. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his horrifying smile, and I heard that disgusting sound of the teeth hitting the desk. I called in sick to work the next day so I could try to relax, and I went for a run to clear my head. It helped enormously, and 3 days later, I had put the whole experience behind me. However, a week ago, about 10 days after the incident, something happened which has made me tell this story. At about 1 a.m., I was awoken by some strange banging sounds. I got up in a haze and looked out the front window to see an old maroon-colored Toyota Camry parked right behind my car, blocking it in. The banging had stopped, but the strange car had put me on edge. I had lived in the neighborhood for a few years, and I never once saw this car. I put on some clothes and began to walk down my stairs and towards the front door. But as I did, the banging began again. It was coming from the back door. I slowly walked towards the door, my heart racing. The closer I got, the louder the bangs. Whatever was causing it was trying to smash the door off its hinges. I wanted to scream, "Get the hell away from my house." However, for once in my life, I made the smart decision and ran up my stairs and into my bedroom before barricading my door and calling 911. The operator picked up just as I heard the window smash from downstairs. "There's a man in my house. He's trying to kill me." I screamed before she responded, telling me to calm down and to tell her my location. She asked me to stay on the line and that a squad car was close by. I heard heavy footsteps stomping up my stairs and towards my door before stopping. The operator asked me if I was still there, but before I could answer her inquiry, the man started to attempt to knock down my bedroom door. The bangs on the door were deafening. The operator kept pushing me to respond, but I couldn't. I was transfixed on the door and how with every sickening thud, that psycho got closer and closer. Suddenly I could hear sirens in the distance and the banging stopped, followed by the sound of quick steps speeding down the stairs, and shortly after, the sound of a car starting and speeding away. A few minutes later, the lights from sirens illuminated my room. This broke me out of my frozen, fearful state. I moved the barricade and ran down my stairs and out the front door to the police. They questioned me for some time and searched around my house. They found shoe and axe marks on both doors. My bedroom door had a massive hole in it from where the lunatic was cutting it. I gave them a full statement and told them everything. When all was finished, they drove me to my friend's house as I couldn't stay at mine anymore. The next day I rang my landlord and canceled my tenancy, which cost me my deposit and a cancellation fee. I've been staying with my friend while I look for a new place. I haven't been sleeping at all. I'm terrified that that psycho will find me again. The police found no evidence that could be used to find him, but the Camry. But there are thousands of them in the state alone. I fear for my life every day, and I'm unsure if I'll ever be safe again. Stay off the dark web. It is mostly used by jokesters, but it only takes one wrong click to put your life in danger. There used to be a small YouTube channel called Sam's Online Food Review. It was run by my best friend, Sam Ryder. A channel full of videos that consisted of Sam eating and reviewing food and drink before a camera. His channel garnered around 10,000 subscribers, which although wasn't huge, it was big enough for Sam to be dedicated to it. I can recall numerous times of sitting in the passenger seat of his car, staying out of his shot, as moments prior he announced he wanted to video himself trying something he picked up in the store, only moving after he signed off with his signature, thumbs up or thumbs down, and his catchphrase, "I like it," or "I loathe it." He was liked for his friendly attitude and happy all around good guy persona. He was well received by his audience. Rarely were there any hate comments, and when there was, Sam would shrug them off and keep smiling. Sam was always smiling. Sam's Online Food Review went dark 7 months ago. No warning, no notice, just deactivated. I didn't hear or see from Sam despite numerous phone calls and house visits to no avail. 6 days after his channel was deleted, I called the police to do a welfare check on Sam. I was worried he had fallen ill or hurt himself. The police made entry into his property and found nothing, and Sam was declared a missing person. A week after Sam was declared missing, a dog walker discovered a horrifically mutilated corpse on a railway line. The body had severe lacerations all around the head, arms, chest, and legs, and almost cut in two across the waist. The decomposing internal organs splayed out of the gruesome V-shaped cut. The autopsy report noted that although no direct cause of death could be confirmed, it was likely the large slit in the throat that brought on death. The autopsy also turned up questionable findings, including the body missing its stomach and heart, long strips of flesh removed off the chest, arms, and lower back, and that the body was exsanguinated. The scene wasn't remarkably bloody, yet the body was almost completely drained of blood. 2 weeks later, the police had identified the deceased. Despite the damage that had occurred to the corpse, the teeth were intact enough to get a viable reference for dental records. My worst fears for Sam were released. It was him. The police investigated, but could not find forensic evidence of any other person being on the scene. They eventually came to the conclusion that he was hit by a passing freight train. The lacerations and disembowelment attributed to being dragged under, and the missing organs explained away as being eaten by wildlife. A fox maybe. Sam's mother decided it was best to cremate what remained of her only son. I stood next to her as the beach coffin was pulled into the large furnace. As the doors closed and the gas jets ignited with a whoosh, she broke down into tears, and so did I. I stood there sobbing for the entire 90 minutes it took for one of the people I grew up with and shared so many memories with was vaporized. I mourned my friend and done my best to move on, and it was going well. I got distracted, got a new job, started dating a girl I met through my work. A few months passed, and even though I missed Sam, things were going well. Right up to the point when I was browsing Reddit at 3 a.m. that I received a Facebook message from the account of my dead friend. I froze, seeing his profile picture in the messenger bubble, a picture taken during good times. Sam's wide smile plastered on his face. I felt a sudden chill. A profound sense of fear enveloped me. You know the fear that makes you cold and your limbs ache as the slow drip of adrenaline spreads throughout your body. With dread, I opened the message. It was a link to a file sharing website. I stared at the seemingly random amalgamation of numbers and letters that made up the URL. My head racing through what the hell was on the other side of the link. And more importantly, why did my dead friend send me it? My hand seemingly on autopilot brought the cursor above the link. With my gut instinct screaming no, I clicked on the link. Before my finger had lifted from the click, I immediately regretted what I just did. Chrome opened a new tab to the website. The screen was gray, apart from a black rectangle in the middle of the page which had a play button over it. I stared at it, unwilling to click. What I was scared of, I did not know. Around 10 seconds had passed, then the screen refreshed. Instead of the play button, the rectangle had the words autoplaying in 5 seconds in bright white. I watched as the numbers counted down, trying to understand what was going on. An abrupt buzzing noise made me jump. The video began to play. The camera was pointed at what appeared to be a grimy white tiled surface. I could hear the sound of muffled whimpering followed by footsteps of someone approaching the camera. There was some slight rusting noise as the camera was adjusted. The screen blurred out as the camera was turned. When the camera was back into focus, I let out a choked gasp. In the middle of a white-tiled room, Sam lay on his back on a stainless steel table. His eyes wide in pure unfiltered terror. The light of a single bulb hanging over the table reflected off the sheen of sweat that coated his forehead. His naked chest rising and falling rapidly in panic. He looked into the camera and attempted to yell. The noise, muffled by a tight cloth gag that was bound around his head. His hands were also bound together tightly with duct tape. I stared at the screen, feeling increasingly sick. My brain failing to grasp what was going on. Before I could even comprehend what was happening, the sound of Sam squirming and whimpering was interrupted by a high pitch. Welcome to Sam's online food reviews. Today we have a special treat. The mocking tone came from behind the camera. Sam's panic increased. He started jerking his body, trying to free his hands. The voice continued. Today we will try what is considered a delicacy in many countries, although usually a forbidden one that is. The camera zoomed out slightly, and a man appeared in the frame, standing in front of Sam. He was dressed in a white coat with a red striped apron on. He wore a butcher's hat and a cloth face mask. In his rubber-gloved hands, he held a large red-handled butcher's scimitar, and in the other, he held a sharpening rod. The man started running the knife up and down the blade in a smooth fashion, the steel on steel making a smooth shk, shk, shk noise. Sam's panicked muffled yells growing stronger. The man placed down the sharpening rod and walked around the table. Sam turned his head and started what sounded like a desperate pleading with the man. "Poor little lamb," the man cooed. "It won't hurt long and you'll be delicious." Even from here, I could see that tears filled my friend's eyes. As he struggled, the man rolled Sam onto his front and pulled his head over the edge of the table. The man then walked out of shot and returned with a metal bucket. He placed it on the floor below Sam's head. In a swift motion, he grabbed his hair and lifted his head and started cutting. Crimson burst from his neck and splashed over the bucket and onto the floor. My friend's body jerking uncontrollably as blood spewed out of his neck like a volcanic eruption. As I watched this happen, I threw up. I fell out of my chair in horror. I pulled myself away, not able to see anymore. I fell again by the door. The speakers of my computer loud enough to hear what sounded like slicing and grunting. I lay curled up in the corner sobbing amidst a panic attack. The minutes feeling like hours. When the sound stopped, I shakily got up and walked to my computer. Avoiding the pool of sick on the floor, I forced myself to look at the screen. The page had closed, and Chrome displayed the Reddit screen. The Facebook tab had one notification. I didn't want to click it, but I willed myself to. It was a message from Sam. I like it. Shout out to my superfans, Sweet Black Swan, Tacey, and Brooklyn. I really appreciate you guys supporting my channel, and I really look forward to making more content for everyone.